want to say very briefly, I also want to introduce and welcome my direct manager here, Rosivena, who I've worked with for more than 3 years. I really appreciate you, Rosie. Always being there, very supportive, and always backing us up whenever we have a webinar like this. So I really want to appreciate you. I want to appreciate everyone and just want to say that this webinar, I believe, is something that you're going to benefit a lot from. So we're going to go, after this, I will be introducing our keynote speaker. And then later on after that, we'll be having a Q&A time, which is a question and answer time, where if you have any questions, you can ask, and we will be able to, as much as possible, respond to all the questions. Now, as you may know, the Just Money Movement is an organization that has helped us a lot in terms of pursuing a lot about ethical financing, green banking, and all that. We have done a lot of campaigns. We have gone out to reach out to people. But the Black Majority Church movement building section of it is the one that tries to connect us with, connect the work of Just Money Movement to the Black majority churches, to be able to, and one of the things actually I've benefited mostly as a person has been my campaign with various companies, campaigning on ethnicity pay gap, campaigning on employment rights, equality, and all that. It's been beautiful, really. And I really wish more people can get involved in it. That's why our topic today is very crucial. That's why we decided to pick our keynote speaker, who was specifically picked for this particular topic because of the relevance it has to the Black majority churches. As you are aware, the Black majority churches are playing a major role, expansionary role in the growth of the church in general in the United Kingdom. The church is growing massively on all bounds, and a lot of attention is being given to what the Black majority church is doing as well. And it's important that the government and individuals and companies and corporations and church leaders are also aware of what's happening by the sideline. I'm sure many of us here are Christians, and you may have heard about what is called a quiet revival that is going on within the Black majority church. And not just the Black majority church alone. I think that's also happening generally across the church board, but specifically within the Black majority church. So it's important to give some very important attention to what is happening within the Black majority church, because the Black majority church caters for a lot of people in need, and it's if attention is given, then we definitely will be able to have the results, the required results that we look forward to. And this is why webinars like this are very important. And I want to appreciate everyone for being part of it. And I want to encourage you, wherever you are, to be part of what the Just Money Movement is doing, the campaigns we are doing, which Rosie is going to probably talk a little bit more about by the time we are rounding up, and other things. If there's any way you can be involved, whether by receiving our emails, our letters, or whether getting involved practically in our campaigns, you are invited to do that. So having said that, I would like to introduce to us our keynote speaker for this evening. As you are aware, our keynote speaker today is Dionne Gravesande, and she is the co-founder or co-chair for the National Church Leaders Forum. The National Church Leaders Forum is an organization committed to facilitating Black Christian voices in the UK. Dionne has decades of experience working with churches and national and international non-governmental organizations. She has played a leading role in Christian aid work on global partnership and ecumenical collaborations in areas of inequality, peace building, gender, and climate. She's also a very, very academically trained person. She has training in theology, international relations, community development, and business administration. And so, apart from that, she's a committed Christian, which is most important for us. And we want to thank God for what she's doing. And so today, I want to welcome to this forum and to this webinar our speaker, Dionne Gravesande. Please, let's welcome her. Thank you, Dionne. You can take over now.
Thank you so much. Can I check that you can hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so it's really good to be with you today. Thank you so much, George, and to the Just Money team, Rosie, for creating this space for the conversation. I am going to speak to you, but it's going to be more conversational as we explore, kind of this theme together, and I share some of my thoughts and experience and the work that the National Church Leaders Forum is doing. So on the screen there, you'll see the manifesto that is available online. So you can go to the website to have a look at the manifesto that looks at about 11 areas. So this manifesto, the cover that you see in front of you, the green cover, we had a revised version, then an update done in 2023. The first manifesto was produced in 2015, and that was to coincide with the then election. I think it was David Cameron, and it was a tool that helped us as a church community look at what are the issues that's affecting our community. And so the way we got to that really is that we had two really big consultations, and they were hosted in London churches. Pastor Matthew hosted one of those from KICC back then, and then the other was hosted in North London, and I think that was one of the Church of God's buildings. But we identified kind of 11 areas, and these are issues in which our pastors and church family workers and so forth are dealing with, whether that is money, whether that is education, whether that is, kind of music and worship. So there's 11 chapters in the revised version, but today I'm going to talk a little bit about the work and the thinking we have done around the economy and what that means to us as people of faith. What does that mean for our theology? What does that mean for our activism? That kind of stuff. So thank you for indulging me as I share some thoughts with you. So I want to begin with something simple. When we talk about money in church spaces, we often make that quite personal, right? So we talk about my giving or my stewardship, my offering, and that's right. But today I want to zoom out a little bit more than that, beyond the person, because I would say money is not just personal, right? It is communal. There is a we, us, and ours about how money is spent, but how money is treated in our society and in our nations per se. We all kind of have an opinion about that, but it's structural too. The very economy and how that is constructed is structural. It's not by accident. It is designed in a particular way. Whether you talk about that in terms of GDP or percentages, it's structural. But money is also spiritual. And I remember a couple of years ago, I attended, it was a forum that was put on by one of the agencies, and it talked about the sacredness of money. So I would say that there's a spiritual aspect of that. So of course we can use that in terms of discipleship and talking about tithes and offering, but actually how money is put to use for the good of the community, for the good of the, kind of the wider we, us and ours. And so for churches, black majority churches particularly, money has always been about survival. It's about dignity, but it's also about community power. So let's go on. If you change the slide for me, please. The reality in which we are facing paints a clear picture. So picked up from the manifesto's chapter on economic development, the writer for this chapter, so we worked with practitioners, okay, and data specialists, of course, but here for this chapter, it was actually authored by Elaine Bowers from Pentecostal Credit Bank. They were Pentecostal Credit Union, PCU, but they're now a fully integrated bank. So, but she was the author of that. So the kind of data behind it exists. And much of that picture in that chapter would say, household of kind of black and brown people are likely to live in persistent poverty. So there's some data around that. We can unpack that a little bit later, but persistent poverty. That in some of those households, ownership is significantly lower and wealth disparity exists. What do I mean by that? If we compare that to kind of home counties and towns and cities, for every pound that is of British wealth in a household, if you did the numbers on that, if you did the figures on that, it would say, well, within households of Black African and Black Caribbean, that pound is likely to be kind of half, about 50p, basically. So the wealth disparity in terms of comparing us to neighboring cities and towns is just significantly low. So rather than going into percentage, it's significantly low. And therefore financial exclusion remains real. It is a reality. And financial exclusion isn't just about not having money, right? It's about not having access to affordable credit. The percentage is always higher if you're deemed to be a credit risk. So it's about a poverty premium. It would be the term that was used. Financial exclusion also means it's about stress. It's about mental health. It's about dignity. So when we're talking about faith, money, and justice, we're not just talking about theories. In our congregations, we look to, kind of the aunties and the uncles, the parents, kind of the mothers and the fathers and the grandparents to understand kind of, so what does that look like in practice when we talk about money in churches? So the biblical picture tells us that wealth by itself is not the enemy. It's not. One thing I appreciate from the manifesto is a line in that chapter that says God is not against wealth creation. There's a text in Deuteronomy, and it reminds us that God is the one who gives the power for creativity, to create wealth, to create, systems that dismantle, bondage and poverty. So that is telling us that wealth must be stewarded well. The Jesus manifesto in Luke 4 begins with good news to the poor. So economic justice isn't just an option of how we talk about the gospel message and good news. I would argue it's part of our prophetic calling. Next slide, please. So in terms of church resilience then, and, what are we doing differently? Here's what I think gets missed out in national conversations. a lot of the economic studies that, are funded or researched and so forth often ignores the contribution of the Black church. And by that, I mean that there are significant numbers. I think, George, you talked about, growth within some of those churches. Some of those are denominational churches, some of those are independent churches. And they have all sorts of names. Some of them are specific by, speak particular languages, but there is growth in these churches. You talked about the quiet revival, but there are a lot of believers in that place, and those believers, kind of contribute to daily society, daily life, daily communities, and so forth. But the manifesto is clear. It says in it, the largest in the church, the Black church as it is the largest independent Black institution in the UK. It is a major repository of Black wealth, and it is a trusted and organized organization in that pastors and bishops and those working within the church structure are often approached by, kind of leaders within local authorities, within business, and so forth. So that, in terms of accessing who is in the churches and recognizing in those spaces are people who are working across, all sections of British society. So let me give you a couple of examples. I talked earlier about the Pentecostal Credit Bank. That was founded in 1980 in response to discrimination from mainstream banks. So, in those times, you couldn't get access to affordable, kind of credit. So when the high street banks excluded Black congregants, so, kind of individuals, the church said, we will build our own. What can we do for ourselves? And so PCB became a place for ethical savings. You could access low-cost loans. This is still true today. It's fully community-owned, and it's got a kind of principle that is rooted in the Christian faith. That's an economic theology in action. Okay, so that's speaking as to what we believe and putting that into action for its members. Another example, so I'm of an age where my parents would participate in something called partnering. And ultimately, I mean, it means you partner with each other. So the partner hand system really was a way of community banking that operated on, I mean, it operated with a number of principles. Trust was one of those, but the idea, this community approach, is that each member who was part of it, so if it was, kind of 10 people, contributed to this pot, this cash pot, and you contributed weekly, and every week one member of the group would get the total of the pot. And what that enabled people to do is save for deposits for whatever that might be. But it was a way of accessing some sort of savings, a capital amount that you were able to kind of invest in something, whether that was property or, traveling or something. It just gave you access to some sort of community savings and banking approach. And in that space, what you saw was the circulation of wealth throughout that, churched community. It offered some sort of resilience because it meant that you had a place to go in order to access, a specific pot of money. I mean, we're talking probably hundreds here rather than thousands, but it was better than nothing. It was better than, trying to get I think today you'd call them short-term cash loans at huge, kind of interest rates. This kept it within the community and kept that circulation around the church community. And in one sense, it was economic wisdom. We were able to build on that model and scale it up and go further. So if people was to say, kind of, can those churches, can kind of the church engage in economic justice? My answer is, well, it always has. It does, and it has. From back in the 60s, there's a model in which we have built within. Next slide, please. So here's the shift, moving then from that financial exclusion that I talked about to a partial inclusion. Are we there? Not? Are we there yet? No, we're not. But then, you move from an informal system of partnering and so forth to formal systems in which, as church communities, with our wisdom, we are able to access, and with our biblical principles, then begin to look at institutions, banking, that offer more ethical frameworks, ethical practice. But, where we are at the moment, the equality remains. And so the manifesto has 4 areas of focus in the economic justice chapter. It talks about financial literacy and tackling that exclusion. So one of the projects NCLF is working with, together with PCB, with the bank, Pentecostal Credit Bank, and an organisation called Vision UK, we are working on developing a course for churches, for congregations, around financial literacy to get better understanding, so that we understand those technical terms, and that, the term, if also implies if you don't know, you don't know how to navigate what can be very tricky financial, kind of structures and processes. So one of the things that we really advocate within the churches is access to good financial literacy. And in doing that, you tackle exclusion. People don't feel that they are isolated and alone and burdened. And of course, we pray, kind of for pathways, to kind of move beyond, kind of our current, situation. But knowledge is key to be informed, to be educated in these things. Once you know, you don't necessarily go backwards. So one of those 4 areas that the manifesto talks about is about strengthening your own financial literacy. Second thing is we talk about is, as a church community, what are the ethical ways in which we can get involved in wealth creation that is about the community? How does the community benefit? How do we understand our assets? Sometimes that's wrapped up in the building that we worship in, but what is it beyond that? So there's something called asset mapping. That's important to learn about too. Third area is around entrepreneurship. I am always inspired in our churches just how much energy there is, particularly from our young people who have fantastic dreams and says, they see a gap in the market and said, I want to do this. I want to open a small business doing this. I want to be able to, flourish in this area. This morning, I was talking to a young lady. She's a believer. She lives in Walthamstow. She's got a fantastic premises, and she's now looking at, I have such a great space here. In the evening, I'd love to be able to open that up to young people, to come and to brainstorm, to discuss, to deliberate, to share your vision, just as a community. And this is outside the church, but because, she's bringing the church with her into her workplace. But she had some fantastic ideas. And I was really inspired, and I encouraged her to say, definitely, I think, you've got a really good idea. Maybe share it with, kind of 3 or 4 people, and offer your space, as a place where they could come and talk and just explore some of these ideas together. But I am really inspired by the talent that is within our churches. And so, how do we make sure that we can create the spaces for them to think about entrepreneurship ideas that ultimately, if our young people succeed, they then become, um, employers. They offer jobs to others, and again, you get the sense of community development and community resourcing and community empowering altogether. I think that's really, really important. And in doing so, I come to my fourth area, which is around, circulating resources internally. I mean, what that means is, the resources that we have collectively, how are we sharing those so that we are all, you lift up everybody, and nobody is left behind. But those kind of four areas are the recommendations we make in the manifesto. So it's moving from a survival economics to one that is kind of strategic wealth building. And that's important because that wealth, even if it's knowledge, is within some of our church congregations. So how do you, or not how do you, we should look at ways of how we encourage those conversations. Don't get me wrong, Sunday is Sunday, right? So Sunday is our day of worship. So this shouldn't necessarily enter into the church space on a Sunday. But the Monday to Friday, thinking about the principles of our faith, how is that visible in the business and money operations of the churches and our own families and communities? That's the gap that I'm saying. Can we close some of that? So if I don't know, imagine, kind of 50 churches, 20 churches, in the town. If all of those churches move their banking to an ethical provider, if they encourage their congregations to use, an ethical money scheme that circulated the wealth back into the church and back into the community, and if they created mentoring networks for people of all ages in the church to access, the multiplier effect of those things would be enormous. It would be enormous. And that then is not charity. That is, kind of community wealth building. That is circulation of knowledge and then power, so that it's not that you reduce the inequality of knowledge, of activity, of wealth in our churches. So that's really, I would really encourage, kind of churches to think about. So how might we put on workshops? How might we have spaces for better understanding and better learning about the benefits of working with and through, ethical institutions, banks, providers, the whole thing. Transforming the systems beyond the kind of individual is really important, because without stewardship, that message feels incomplete. It feels like you're speaking to the individuals. It is the kind of community. It is the church level. It is, how we are working together as a whole is what I would say. The manifesto makes a really bold statement, and it says the route to true equality is an economic one. The route to true equality is an economic one, because of how kind of society works. It needs to be resourced in one way, and if the economy is not fair and just, then you suffer the consequences of that at all levels. So what does that mean in practice? I often advocate it's important for churches to speak to fiscal policy. By that, I mean just how governments and local authorities work and design policies around around money. We have a voice in that. If you are a tax-paying individual, you have a voice. And so when you hear about the budget or fiscal policy being discussed, whether that's the headlines at News at 10 or whatever that might be, it's important for us just to get to understand what that means, how that works for us as communities, how that then works, or how that then finds its way into our daily life. And I would think it actually enters into quite a lot of kind of the activities of daily life, fiscal policy. So how money works or doesn't work, online banking, cashless, all of that kind of thinking, that's out there when politicians are looking for your vote. In May, for example, how does that work together? But I guess what I'm saying is it's important for us to get to understand and know a little bit more about it. And if churches are putting on, short, kind of workshops or just, seminars, webinars, things like this event is really to encourage you to increase your own understanding in all of that. Really important to challenge unjust lending, so that kind of cash day loan, and people get into that because of the situation, but long term that is not how you build healthy societies, healthy communities. It's important to understand what agency do we have, and speaking to that and calling things out when it is structurally unjust and wrong. We should be doing more to think about economic development and education for our communities. And it's worth encouraging local government, local actors to recognize churches are, economic actors. So whether that is us buying buildings or hosting big events, that's really important. So who and how do we want to partner? And this is where organizations like Just Money matters. It matters because I think they've got some really good material, church packs, to help you understand and begin to unpack some of these issues for yourself and your church. Let me broaden the lens just a little bit to talk about the environment, because I would say the environment and the economy are connected. Earlier, I heard George mention, kind of green money. Section 4 of the manifesto, so there's another chapter that speaks to the environment. And in that, and that's a whole section within itself, so I'm not going to try and unpack that now because we don't have time, but it talks about the climate injustice disproportionately impacting those in poorer or kind of densely populated urban communities. And the document makes an important point, and it talks about structural and systematic, racism, and how that needs to be dismantled if we are going to stop the kind of climate chaos and collapse in which we're talking about. And you would say, well, that's got to, what does that have to do with money? I would say three things really. Energy poverty, affects our congregation. So I work with a small, as a volunteer, I work with a small group in my hometown around helping people who are energy poor, basically, access information, access help, access various structures in order, just to be able to keep warm. It's a big issue. Second thing is around food insecurity. So whether that is, kind of food banks that some churches are running, my church, have a big program around Christmas, which is around Christmas boxes. So basically delivering boxes of food, for Christmas, and then, kind of in January, as part of the good works of the church. But again, that kind of food insecurity, how you access food, where is that being grown? all of those have got, kind of implications of, kind of climate uh, uh, chaos behind it, because basically, it's less. So economic justice and environmental justice are intertwined. And I haven't done that chapter justice, but if you do look at it online, there's a whole chapter there. We worked with Reverend Reuben King, who's based up in Wolverhampton, I think, and he worked for one of the green charities before he took up full-time ministry. So he shares a lot of his experience in that area. So to my final slide, please. Where do we go from here? And I would say, oh, maybe that was the final slide. Sorry. I would say three things. It's worth us thinking about three things. I want to leave three things with you. It's worth us thinking about, where is our money going? So audit our money. Where is the church doing its banking? Where are we investing? Who are we investing with? And who's benefiting from our spending? Is that circulating back in kind of the church community or not? Is there something smart the church could be doing? But important to think about how we audit our own money. It's important to teach. I would call it economic discipleship, but it is educating ourselves. It is that whole awareness thing that I talked about, the financial literacy. Many conversations shouldn't only happen at offering time. We should be thinking about, as church communities, how are we sharing information around debt awareness? Where are we signposting people to? How are we saving? Where are we saving? I talked about entrepreneurship. What schemes might we, create in church to, develop little pots of money to so that our own congregations could apply to that in order to birth, a vision, an idea. And then, kind of the collective investment of our churches, where is that being, where is that going? But I think we should be teaching a lot more around economic education. And then the last area is around partnership. How are we building partnerships with banks and credit unions, just money, in terms of helping us to have the resources and material we need to educate ourselves? How are we working with ethical finance bodies and policymakers? Because, your voice matters. It can shape policy, and that policy could be built on, Christian principles. There is a bank, I think it's called Kingdom Bank. I haven't worked with them for a long time, but I know that the days when I was doing with Christian Aid, leading some of the work at Greenbelt, which is a Christian festival. Kingdom Bank were not only sponsors, but they did some really great money workshops, and I think actually some of their material really helped me to understand just how much of a voice we have as individuals in shaping, kind of policy for, banking. That's really, really important. So let me end there. I've left you with quite a bit, but I want to say to you, that the church is more than a worship space. For many, it is a refuge. It's giving them access to, a welfare system in terms of the church's own ecosystem, right? In terms of, caring for individuals. The church at times has been an incubator for all sorts of ideas and visions and dreams. The church, is a voice for the masses. So we're not starting from ground zero. We are building on resilience that has come well before us. So money in our hands is not just currency. It's a calling, it's our collective community power. And if we steward it well, then not only can we, develop collectively, prophetically as a church, but we will reclaim our community wealth. As the um, uh, slide here says, reclaim the wealth, churches circulate or recirculate the power to transform systems and structures so that they actually work for people and enable us to flourish and thrive. Thank you for giving me your time this evening. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Dionne. That's absolutely wonderful. I just wish you could just go on and on and on. That's really wonderful. Thank you for the work you do for the Christian body. Thank you for the work you do for the Black majority churches in the UK. We really appreciate you, and thank you for that wonderful presentation, where I'm sure that everyone here must have gleaned one thing or the other that will be useful in their work in the community from here. I would want to invite my line manager, who is on the call, Rosivena, to introduce one of our special guests here as well, who is one of our trustees, and to just give us a brief speech on just probably about 5 minutes of her involvement with Just Money Movement. And after that, Rosie will tell us a few things for the night. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you, George, and thank you so much, Dionne. It's been really wonderful to hear you speak. I'm going to invite one of our trustees, Naomi Sterling Wilson, to just share a few thoughts about her involvement with Just Money movements. Naomi has a wealth of experience, and we're very glad to have her on our board to help with our governance. And we thought it would be great to hear a little bit about Naomi's involvement with Just Money movements, her passion for the work. So I'm going to invite Naomi to unmute and join us and just share a few reflections. I should also take this opportunity to say that we will be recruiting for new trustees soon. And so if this is an area of work that you're really interested in, if economic justice is something that you're really passionate about, that you want to help mobilise more churches around, then do keep an eye on our website to hear more about how you can get involved with Just Money movement and explore whether becoming a trustee might be something that you could do. But hopefully Naomi is there and can join us.
I am. Hi, Rosie, and
hi,
everyone. Good evening. And thank you, firstly, to Rosie, because I was going to close with that, so that's great, and I'll just reinforce it again. Once I finish with my brief remarks, I hear you, George. And to everybody that has joined on the call this evening, I also, as a trustee, want to say thank you, because this topic in which we are speaking about is not, as you can see, that everybody's still finding their feet, particularly in the Black majority church Pentecostal space, with engaging with this. And this is one of the reasons why I became a trustee with Just Money Movement. So just a bit about me. As Rosie said, I am Naomi Sterling Wilson. I serve in a church in Reading called the New Testament Church of God Covenant. And I joined Just Money Movement in September of 2024. Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, because he helps chair us together. Hi, Jeff. And the reason why I joined Just Money Movement, and I think I'll keep this to three things, and I'll call it the AAA. I have an affinity, which is my first A, to going towards things where I see that there is a gap, and particularly within my own community, and I'm talking about the Black community now, where I know that something needs to change, but then also partnering that with which is kingdom and my faith. And so with this, I decided to join Just Money Movement because, as Dionne was talking about earlier, We need more financial literacy, but also as well, there is a growing group of, and I don't really like to say this now because of millennials, let's say, but also Gen Z. So that's the 14 to 29-year-olds who are part of this silent revival, who have now embedded themselves in institutions and within activities who can really have a voice to speak to this more so than what our predecessors may have had. And so um, I wanted to use my own voice. So I've been in policing previously. And in working with the Met Police, and why would you do that, Naomi? Because there is a language that needs to be understood, so that we can help build our community. The third thing is about advice. Um, and George and Rosie know me for kind of prompting them and asking them questions. One, to advise them because of my background, which is advising political leaders. And also now, actually, predominantly is about advocacy and engagement, leading a large organization to be able to do that effectively and making the right partnerships to help mobilize communities together and with their endeavors. And so the final thing that I would say is the reason why I am a trustee is because of my affinity, advice, and also advocacy is really a strong component to what I do. And if I just tie all this back now to one of my favorite people in scripture is Nehemiah. And if you look at the Nehemiah, I kind of align myself to Nehemiah because he was cupbearer, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know what it's like to be in those spaces. And he uses that which is his position to speak to a king who gives him authority to then make changes in a land and rebuild a structure and a system. And so, this is what I feel that my role is. And also, I feel like there is other people, and you may not be in that kind of political system or in those spaces, but you have a voice. And like I said, the other 20 people on this call together also have that voice with Dionne's NCLF membership as well, and also they have a voice. And if we can truly use that to be able to make substantive change, then we will begin to see what Nehemiah was able to do, which was community wealth building. If you look in chapter 5 of Nehemiah, you will see that. And so my final kind of closing remarks would be then is that tonight when you leave from here as a trustee, um, I find it really valuable what Just Money Movement is doing. And they have a wealth of resources that you can use that people just don't know about. And so even if it's about you just telling one person or the congregation about what it is to do better banking, what it is to look at your pensions and be able to switch banks, if it is to join up or partner with somebody that's on this call tonight and say, you know what, I saw that you were on there, like, how can we do something together? There was a question about how to work or to know about the manifesto. Why not invite the politician to your church and ask them those questions? That is their MPs are there to do that. I can tell you that you write into them and ask them to tell you what they are doing within their manifesto and probe them. That's their job. So yeah, what I'll say is make sure you use Just Money Movement's resources. And also, as Rosie said at the beginning of the intro, is I want to see more people who have a passion just like me, particularly maybe from the Black community, younger, who are really passionate about this space. There is trustee roles coming up, but also not just that, there are other opportunities with Just Money to be able to use your voice and your action to be able to speak truth to power. And that's it from me. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for listening to me tonight.
Thank you so much, Naomi, and we're really blessed to have you and your wisdom and your challenge and the connections that you so generously share. So thank you very much for sharing your reflections with us as well. I'm going to share briefly some opportunities to stay in touch with Just Money Movement, and I'm going to put up slides just to help us remember some of the ways in which you can be involved. So one very simple thing you can do if you're not already part of our mailings, you can join up via the QR code or the link that's on the slides here. We promise we won't inundate you with emails, but we will carefully tailor those emails so that you get to hear about resources, that you get to hear about events like these. And we really welcome conversation and dialogue. So that if there are things that you would like to see Just Money Movement pay more attention to, if there's an area of economic justice that's of concern to you and your church community, then we really want to hear from you. I'm so grateful for George for the work that he's been doing over the past 3 years in trying to really listen to Black majority church leaders and communities, to hear about the concerns and the things that you're working on, and bringing people together in spaces like this to hear from expert speakers, to discuss and to have conversation. So thank you, George, for the work that you've been doing. I think you've brought some really important issues before us, and things that will bear fruit in the future. So thank you for that. For those who've not been involved in the Just Money movement before, as we've said, there's lots of resources on our website to help you with those very practical steps that you can take as an individual or as a church, with looking at the ethics and values of your finances. But also, and as Dionne has rightly pointed out, it's not just about those individual actions, it's about the community level action that we can take as churches ecumenically, to speak out against structural injustice. And so there are ways for you to join in with wider campaigns. We have 2 campaigns running at the moment, which you can find out about via our website. One is on tax justice, campaigning for a fairer tax system so that those on the lowest income are not paying proportionately more tax than those who have extreme wealth. Looking at how we can structure the tax system more fairly so that we can bring in the taxes that are needed to pay for the things that will make a material difference to people's lives in healthcare, in social care. So you can join in with us. We have template emails that you can send to your MP to call for a fairer tax system. We're also campaigning on better pensions at the moment. We know that the pension system in many ways is broken, that there'll be many people facing poverty in retirement, particularly women and Black and minority ethnic communities, who won't have decent pensions to live on when they retire. We're also conscious with the environmental and climate angle that much of the way that our pensions are invested is causing harm in a way that will make the future worse for everyone and for future generations, through investments in fossil fuels and other harmful sectors. And so we have a petition to the Pensions Minister that you can sign as well. So really encourage you to raise your voices. We'd love to see a stronger Christian voice in public discourse on money, greater theological reflection and sharing of that, so that together we can campaign more effectively. So these are ways that you can stay in touch with us. Please do be in touch on email if there are specific things that we can help with. I will hand back to George. I think he might just have a few final words to say as we finish. But thanks again to Dionne for joining us. It was wonderful to hear you. Thank you for everything that you have shared, and thank you also to Naomi.
Yes, thank you very much, Rosie. We're doing very well with time, and we'll be rounding up now. And if you have any questions that has not been, if anything still comes up in your mind and you want us to look at it, and please do contact us. You can just refer to our website and send us a word, and we'll be able to reach out to you. It's quite important that you get involved one way or the other. You could be involved both directly and indirectly. And we do hope to see you again. And we really do appreciate everyone, because most of you here are pastors and leaders of different organizations. It's quite great to see you, and we do hope that you carry the fire of what Dionne has told us today, and also Naomi has challenged us further with our involvement with the Just Money movement. So I want to encourage you as a church leader, as a mentor to people, a leader in different organizations, you just continue to keep in touch, and please try and visit our website. You'll find a lot of things that will be quite useful. And also, we've got materials that are quite useful for church leaders that will be sent to you if you do requests for some. We could post them to you as well if you want us to do that. So once again, I really thank everyone for joining us for our first webinar for the year. And I think it might be a bit late to say Happy New Year to every one of you, but this is the first time I'm seeing you. So, but anyhow, thank you for coming. And I do look forward to seeing you once again. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Dionne. Thank you. And thank you, Joe. Thank you, Karin. Thank you, everybody. Minister Shego, Laliko, Amarachi, thank you for your beautiful question. Emmanuel, Samuel, Maria, Adenika, Ade, Jane, and all of you. Thank you so much. If I didn't mention your name, just take it that I've said thank you to every one of you. I really appreciate you. And thank you for always showing up. And having said that, I will call on Rosie to just say a closing prayer for us as we round up.
Thank you, George. God of love, God of power, God of eternity, thank you for our speakers this evening. Thank you for the things that you have placed on our hearts and the seeds that you have sown. Would you be with us in the conversations that we go on to have, the information that we share, the things that we explore? And we pray for the work of the National Church Leaders Forum. We pray for Dionne's work, for that powerful work of raising up Christian voice and exploring so many important issues and making those more available to people, for the resources and the manifesto and all the hard work that has gone into providing those resources to stimulate thinking and action and conversation. Pray that you will be with each of us as we continue in our evening and in the week ahead. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you. God bless. Good night and bye.